Blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go out to Brittany Hughes, Media Research Center Television. Brittany, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Not bad. I wonder what we're going to talk about. Is that here we go? I'll be Jim Acosta, and you could be Sarah Sanders. Is the press the enemy, ma'am?
Oh my goodness. You know what? I wouldn't go so far as to say that the press is the enemy necessarily, but I do think that Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is fantastic, by the way, and just is, I don't know how she does her job all day long. I would lose my mind. She is so calm and does a fantastic job dealing with just an absolutely caustic media there in the press briefing room at the White House almost every single day. She made a really good point yesterday. If you saw the exchange between her and CNN's Jim Acosta, who basically wanted her to parrot this Fed line that he was giving her, where he wanted her to say that the press is not the enemy, which of course is something that Trump has said in the past, and it makes sense. She's not going to come out and just blatantly go against, the president that she works for. And because she wouldn't just parrot his line, he got all upset. There was this big blowout. He ended up getting up like a petulant child and storming out. And what's really interesting is that, here is a press who has vilified this woman who, the left has absolutely gone out to her to the point where she can't hardly even walk into a restaurant without getting booted out because of who she works for, and she's called horrible names. The White House Press Association just completely screwed up when they hired Michelle Wolf to come on and just absolutely make fun of this poor woman, all the way down to her appearance, which was just entirely uncalled for. And then they wonder why she's not going to come out in defense of them when they've done nothing but attack her and insult her since she's held this job. It's no wonder. And I think she made some really good points yesterday when she said, look, I've been personally attacked. I've been insulted. You guys have had no problem with that, but you want me to come out in defense of you? I don't think so. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. She handled herself very, very measured and very calmly, and I was actually very impressed.
Indeed. You get to a point, Brittany, whether it's personal or professional, where it's just so toxic, and you have all these folks, and you have and these are my words, not yours, the liberal loon from that worked for Playboy or Penthouse, trying to chime in there about the families and such, and you think to yourself, you take a journalism class or whatever, the press is supposed to let the story speak and investigate, but what we saw yesterday was totally the opposite. It's like the mob is trying to get her.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and this is what I would say to Jim Acosta. Your job is not to feel something. Your job is not to sit in a press briefing room and have the White House press secretary make you feel better about the press or about American opinion. Your job is not to get emotionally invested in how she feels about you and what she does or doesn't say about you in your defense. Your job is to ask questions and to report the facts. If you feel that they skirt a question or they don't report accurately, then report that. Your job is to report the facts, not to sit there and get into some personal tit for tat with the White House press secretary and slam her and tweet about it if she doesn't make you feel better. That's how toddlers act, and throw themselves on the Walmart floor when they don't get the lollipop that they want. That's what that displays. That's not being a journalist. And you're exactly right. The one thing I would say, actually, that I've been a bit surprised about with the White House is that if I were the White House press secretary, there are many times where I would have had somebody thrown out because of how they've behaved. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders has actually showed them some grace and some deference by allowing them to repeatedly interrupt her, to repeatedly attack her, to launch what I consider to be just flat out insults at her. You're exactly right. It was actually just about a couple of months ago when a reporter from Playboy stood up and just began screaming at her, would not let her get in a word edgewise, would not let her call on anybody else, just continued to berate her. And that man, frankly, should have been removed from the room. And she didn't. She actually allowed him to stand there and make a fool of himself. There have been many cases where she has actually given them some grace that I wouldn't have given them. And so again, the fact that she wasn't willing to sit there and just say, well, sure, Jim, let me parrot your line because it makes you feel better. That's not her job, and it's not his job to ask her to do so. That's not being a journalist. But then again, we've seen the evolution of journalism so much these days. I'm not sure Jim Acosta knows what being a journalist is at this point. He's an activist. He's an activist. I mean, now he's calling for reporters to go out and chant in the streets that they are not the enemy of the people and to wear buttons, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm sure that's sure to make the American people love you even more, Jim. But that's being an activist. That's not being a journalist.
Brittany Hughes joining us, Media Research Center Television. Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. You take a look at the activist journalists, whether it's Acosta, whether it's Chuck Todd, whether it's others, and the entire Sunday shows will be targeting this. And it's just not an opinion. This has an impact on forming opinions throughout the country because you have people that they might see a clip, they might watch Meet the Press, and they think that one side is the only side worth looking at when it comes to coverage. And if Brittany, if the media were fair, you wouldn't have a job. Talk radio wouldn't exist. But you have to have the other side of the story.
It does create some pretty good job security for me over at the Media Research Center for sure. So I have to be grateful to them for that, I suppose. It keeps me it keeps me in room and board. But that's exactly why we at the Media Research Center exist. And over at Newsbusters, they do an absolutely great job analyzing the media and how much bias there really is out there. And I would say, yes, absolutely, it is incredibly dangerous to have a media that spews this one-sided narrative, and people believe that. I mean, whether it's on immigration and telling outright lies about what's happening at the southwest border, which we saw. I mean, a lot of the information, that was coming out about that ended up not being correct. We just ended up running a story the other day about how National Geographic faked a story essentially on a polar bear they said was dying of climate change. Turns out that wasn't true at all, but that story went viral. So even all the way down to something like National Geographic, you can have a narrative that people will buy that's not based in fact. But I think the other thing that's important to point out here is that this is exactly how you got Trump in the first place, because people stopped just buying it. People stopped just taking whatever the media was giving them as fact, and they started to rise up and realize, look, this is not true. This is simply not true, and they got really tired of it. Jim Acosta wants to know why he goes to Trump rallies, and they absolutely cannot stand him, and they boo CNN, and they boo the media, and they start yelling things like, tell the truth and stop lying. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. When you do things like peddle, photos of kids that you're saying are being separated from their parents at the border, and it turns out that wasn't true and that it was totally made up, that is the kind of thing that people get tired of. They get tired of being told lies. They get tired of being fed an agenda instead of facts. And that is part of what contributed to Trump winning the 2016 election, is people got so incredibly sick of it. So it's very interesting that they hate this president, they hate everybody who supported him, and yet they continue to dig the same holes and do the very things that contributed to his election in the first place, which is just push a narrative, push a shameless agenda, and continue to lie. People are tired of that. The vast majority, and poll after poll shows this, the vast majority of Americans say that they no longer trust the mainstream media. There is a reason for that. And if CNN and Jim Acosta had any brains at all, they would stop, throwing temper tantrums over whether or not the White House press secretary made them feel better, and start taking a hard look at why their ratings are in the toilet and people say that they don't trust them anymore.
Brittany Hughes joining us, Media Research Center. Let's talk a little bit about this young lady that's getting a lot of attention nationally. I can't even pronounce her name, Brittany, so you're going to have to do this. 200 million Americans make less than $20,000 a year.
Yes, so her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and it took me a few minutes to be able to roll that one off the tongue myself. But she's running in New York. She's the young lady who unseated a 10-time incumbent in the primary. So, of course, it garnered national headlines. She's young. She's a Democratic socialist, identifies very much with Bernie Sanders. And unfortunately, so does her math, because it simply doesn't add up. This is a young lady who claims to have an economics degree, for which, frankly, I think she should get a refund, because she doesn't seem to understand how the economy works. For example, she went on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, which is a Comedy Central show, but millions of people watch it and take what is said on there as gospel fact. And she made a lot of erroneous claims, but one of my favorites was she claimed that 200 million Americans make less than $20,000 a year. And as soon as I heard that, everything about that set off alarm bells for me in terms of whether or not it was factual. So, of course, did a little bit of number crunching. First of all, she claimed that 200 million Americans represents about 40% of the country. That would mean that there are about 500 million Americans total. And there's not. There's about 330 to 340. So she's off on that. She doesn't even know how many people live in the country. The second problem is when she claims that 200 million people make less than $20,000 a year, the entire U.S. workforce is only about 155 million people. So I don't know where this magical, imaginary 45 million people came up with that she found somewhere else, but her claim outnumbers the entire U.S. workforce. We looked up some U.S. Census data, and it turns out that only about 28 million U.S. households live under incomes of $25,000 or less. They didn't have a $20,000 threshold, so we took the next closest one, which is $25,000. 28 million households live with incomes $25,000 or less. That includes, and that's nowhere even near 200 million. And this is going to include non-working children, the elderly, the retired, the disabled, any dependents that someone might have. You even if you expand that to say, okay, each one of those 28 million households includes about 2.5 people, which is the average household in the United States, you still come in at under 80 million people total. That's not even close to this 200 million number. So again, this idea that she's trying to push this narrative that this huge segment of the population is living in squalor and poverty. Look, again, poverty is an issue, and if you want to address it, that's perfectly fine. We need to address those things, but at least do so in fact. And when you say things like 200 million people equals 40% of the population, we're not even dealing in this. It's not even a Republican or a Democrat issue or a capitalist versus a socialist issue. We're talking about basic facts like how many people live in the country. If you're going to run for public office, and if you're going to say that you want to be effective in creating policy that affects the lives of millions and millions of Americans, shouldn't you at least know basic facts such as how many people live here? You know, and this is where you get into trouble with a lot of Democratic socialists. It's the same thing you get into when you talk about Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan. The math simply does not add up. It's not even at this point about whether or not you have a good idea or a bad idea. It's a simple matter of if you have $5, how many cheeseburgers can you buy? This is basic math.
Right.
You know, and it just simply doesn't add up. And she has a history of now, at this point, of saying a lot of things that simply don't make factual sense. This was one of them.
Brittany Hughes, always appreciate you. Great to have you back on from the Media Research Center Television. You have a great day, ma'am.
Thank you.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, back to this issue concerning the press and whether or not you consider them positive or a negative when it comes to promoting the public good. What do you think?
What do I know? But I did become president in like a year and a half. But they can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news. Whatever happened to fair press? Whatever happened to honest reporting?
I'd like to hear from you next, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio.
All right, get him out. Get him out.
But no, I do not feel that the media is the enemy of the people.
Do you think that we're the enemy of the people?
Sorry?
Do you think the media is the enemy of the people?
No, I do not.
And there we have it, the president's daughter, the president, Sarah Sanders, all rolling with Kevin Miller here at KIDO Talk Radio.
The media has attacked me personally on a number of occasions, including your own network, said I should be harassed as a life sentence, that I should be choked. ICE officials are not welcomed in their place of worship, and personal information is shared on the internet. When I was hosted by the Correspondents Association, of which almost all of you are members of, you brought a comedian up to attack my appearance and call me a traitor to my own gender. In fact, as I know, as far as I know, I'm the first press secretary in the history of the United States that's required Secret Service protection.
There we have it, talking about the press. We go to the phones. Max, Garden City, Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Max.
Good morning, Kevin Miller. It's interesting if conservatives behaved, acted out against liberals the way liberals act out against us, it would be considered the most heinous behavior in the world. Whatever happens to press conferences? Press conference where all the media gather and wait and raise their hands. Ooh, me first, me first. And the press secretary chooses them and they ask a question and answer it. Whatever happened to those? I haven't seen any since the Obama administration.
Good point.
It's every reporter wants a chance to get his 5 minutes of fame. They want to stand up and attack Sarah Sanders and attack the White House. I wonder if they attack the cleaning crew and the janitorial staff. Just a thought. You've got a good one going today, Kevin. Keep it up, partner.
Thank you, Brother Max. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning. We continue on taking your calls. Let's go to Mike in Meridian with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. How are you today?
Living the dream, and you?
Oh, this time of the morning it takes 3 cups of coffee to get my mind functioning so I can intelligently talk to somebody, especially like you. Now, you and I have a mutual friend that he had gone to your birthday party a while back. And we were talking about what would it take to have President Trump here for one of his wild rallies.
Right.
Think it's possible?
Well, we have publicly come out and urged the president to come here. We've blogged about it. We're figuring out how to continue to raise awareness for this. I know a lot of folks in Idaho, Mike, would love to make that happen. And we're willing to be a part of that as far as people like yourself and this unnamed mutual friend who think it's a great idea. We have this forum, 2 radio stations, not just one. Let's, ratchet it up and get the president here.
That would be a good idea. And what would it take, for Pete's sake, people calling in someplace or some number in Washington, or going to a venue like you on the radio station and get something going that way?
Well, it's a work in progress, but I can tell you're ready to go.
Well, I'm ready to go. We can get it over here, and I can get tickets. I'd like to sit up in the stands right behind him, for Pete's sake.
It's funny because we've been thinking about it, whether we would put it on, we would have him on the Blue, or why not have him in Meridian or in Nampa. Wherever you go, it's going to be great. But you're going to have the usual suspects poo-pooing it. I wonder if the mayor of Boise would welcome the president like he did when old Obama came to town. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, I remember that all too well, for Pete's sake. That's right. The problem when you're dealing with the left wing and the Democrats. They're so far out in the left field, and, it just gets disgusting after a while. I could probably go on talking in private because my thoughts on that probably get a little bit on the radical side, but I try to come up with conclusions, and I look at things, and it's 2 and 2 equals 4, not 3 or 5. I have an open mind to things. I study history, and I'm at a point where I think history is repeating itself, not from Europe, but in America, of what happened back about 75 years ago. If you know what I'm talking about.
I do. Mike, thank you for listening. Appreciate you.
Good. You have a good one, and we'll see if we can keep working on this. Thank you very much for listening to me this morning. You have a good one, and be safe.
All right, Mike. Mike in Meridian. More coming up. Doug, anti-government Ryan. Boy, it's been a while. Scott in Caldwell. One line open, 580-5436, 580-KIDO. When will the media ever learn their lesson?
You did not say in the course of those remarks that you just made that the press is not the enemy of the people. Are we to take it from what you just said? We all get put through the ringer. We all get put in the meat grinder.
Sure, Jim. When's the last time you were thrown out of a restaurant for doing your job? Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin.
Blessed to be a part of your day. Coming up, John Decker from the White House, but we will go to Doug in Mountain Home on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin. Yeah, it makes my heart just freaking with joy to see the news media get their own freaking medicine. I mean, they have been so corrupt. I mean, for how long, who knows? They're run by the Democrats, which is run by George Soros. I can't stand them, and I think it's just great that Sarah Sanders Huckabee, or however you say, maybe it's the other way around. God bless that woman. Stand up to them and tell them what it's like. And this country's telling them what it's like because they're plummeting on their population. You know what I'm trying to spit out.
I'm with you.
So, yeah, I just love it. I hope it. Yeah, and listening to them, the Democrats, about when President Trump tweeted, sometimes I wish he'd shut up with that stuff, but I like his arrogance. But anyway, when he tweeted about stopping the witch hunt and they said obstruction of justice, what justice? Ever since that clown, the last one that was in there, and you know who I'm talking about, there ain't been no justice. They're seeing it. It's getting uncovered. There's no justice as long as they're running it. For crying out loud, people are just going on all over the place. One thing I don't understand.
Well, Doug, I'm going to ask you to hang on for a minute. Let's go live to the White House. John Decker joining us now. John, good morning.
Hey, good morning to you, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm just wondering if you and everybody else survived yesterday's showdown in the press room.
I'm here talking to you, so yes, I survived it. Absolutely. I've been asked quite a bit about this over the course of the past 24 hours, and I think that yesterday in the briefing room, both Jim Acosta from CNN and Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary, both are pleased with the way things turned out, in the sense that Jim Acosta, has a clip that he can play over and over on CNN, which appeals to the people that watch CNN. And Sarah Sanders, in terms of not sort of backing down in terms of what the president has said about the press corps, gave some grist for the mill to supporters of President Trump. So I think they're both pleased with the way that exchange worked itself out yesterday.
Was it like being, though, at a private party or something when it just gets uncomfortable, or is it just kind of business as usual?
It's business as usual. Nothing surprises me anymore in the briefing room. And that kind of exchange, that kind of back and forth happens every few weeks or so. And so, no, I didn't feel uncomfortable at all. I think that they both made some very good points. You have to remember, people forget this about any press secretary, but Sarah Sanders is not in that briefing room talking to reporters and representing herself or representing her opinions. She speaks on behalf of the president, and there will never be any daylight between what the president says and what she says. And you will never hear her disagree with the president. That's not her function. That's not her job. So keep that in mind whenever you watch those White House press briefings. She is not in there espousing her point of view, espousing her opinions. she's in there speaking on behalf of the president and the way he feels about particular issues, both foreign and domestic.
John, let's talk about last night's rally in Pennsylvania. The president in rare form once again.
Another campaign-style rally, and get used to them because we're getting closer and closer to the midterm elections. The president is certainly going to hit the road quite a bit, probably from Labor Day on. I think he's mentioned the idea of being on the road 6 or 7 days a week, campaigning for Republicans, running for re-election, running for the House, running for the Senate. And so the campaign-style rally that we heard yesterday in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, not that much different than the campaign-style rally that took place on Tuesday in Tampa, Florida. The president sort of touching on some of the same subjects, whether you're talking about Russia or North Korea or the press corps. The president touched on all of those things last night in Pennsylvania.
John Decker, you have a great weekend. We always appreciate you, brother.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye, our great friend John Decker. Scott in Caldwell with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, sir. Hey, do you remember in the 80s how Time Magazine, MTV, Hollywood, and the liberal media treated the Reagans?
Oh, yeah.
Bands like Genesis and Simply Red. It's such a sleazy attack back then, and nobody called them on it. In fact, Time Magazine, if you remember, voted and made Gorbachev Man of the Year. Phil Donahue was out to paint Reagan as the Antichrist. And I'm glad to see Trump fight back because Reagan, as polished as he was, he very, very seldom fought back. But I totally agree with you and a previous caller. This is history just repeating itself. I'm glad we've got a fighter in the White House. That's what it's going to take. And I'm glad that Sanders Huckabee is willing to fight back.
Well, she truly gets it. And when you go through this, you have to feel for her and say, when is enough enough? When are they going to, you know, the reason why we have talk radio and Fox News and everything else is the one-sided bias of the media that is, you know, been running wild for quite some time. And look, we all take our lumps, but these guys and gals can dish it out and can't take it. And I love the faux outrage. How dare anyone question their integrity when it is their job to do the very thing that they don't want to be accountable for?
Well, I'm curious. I don't know how old you are, but I think that if you remember the 80s, I think you do.
I'm 50 years old, so.
Okay, we're the same age. So I'm sure that when you were in high school, and I don't know if you had the same lib teachers that I had to deal with, but you know they would come out swinging, and they would get the class behind them attacking Reagan. And it wasn't Daniel Ortega. It wasn't Fidel Castro. It was Reagan that they were painting as the bad guy. And there you are in high school, you know, because you can think critically, even as a teenager, that something's really wrong. But you don't really have a voice. And thank God there are people like you. They're giving a voice to people like us so that we can stand up against what we clearly know is wrong.
Well, we're all the same, and I can remember in high school one of the great accomplishments of my life was taking on a group of 28 kids during Iran-Contra and debating that issue. You remember that?
Yeah, I do. That would have been something to see. I would have been right there cheering you on, brother. Anyway, I just it's so amazing because you look at the way that Obama and his wife were treated.
Right.
And then you look at the way Melania's never done anything, to anybody. She's never brought anybody any harm. And it's so filthy and so foul, the way that they treat her. It just reminded me so much of MTV and these bands, again, like Genesis and Simply Red, the foul language that they were throwing out at at the Reagans, and nobody was calling on them. It was totally cool. But thank God we got some fighters out there, fighters like yourself. I'm very thankful.
Scott, thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Anti-Government Ryan with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Anti-Government Ryan.
Kevin Miller, the creme de la creme of Idaho Talk Radio. Good to talk to you, sir.
It's been a while.
Yes, sir. So when you think about the media has figured out a long time ago that they have much more power by trying to shape and form instead of just reporting, you know. Fox News has that little saying, we report, you decide. Well, the media, many chunks of the media has decided we will tell you people listen and lay down like a subservient dog and take your medicine. Listen to us, to what we have to say. But there's millions of people that can think on their own 2 feet and have critical thinking skills, Kevin. And they're not gonna take this stuff anymore. And when you think about the media loves the controversy because that leads to additional viewers, which leads to additional advertising, which leads to more profit for whatever company they're working for. So again, you have another example of money is driving large chunks of the media to do what they're doing. And when you take a look at, let me make a comparison here, Kevin. You take a look at like the Matt Lauers of the world and the Harvey Weinsteins, the serial harassers. Huge chunks of the media, they're serial harassers, is what they are, because they're trying to intimidate people. They try to agitate people. They try to stir up the controversy, and then as soon as somebody pushes back on them, then they're like, oh, well, wait a minute, now you're being the aggressor here. You're being the problem. When really the media has brought this all on themselves, and it's been decades, as we know, Kevin, that the media is bringing this on themselves, and now they get some pushback because you get a fighter in the White House, somebody that actually has a pair and knows how to stand up to people because of his business background. These politicians, they never want to have a controversy because then they might not get reelected, because that's all they care about. But the media and these serial sexual harasser people, there's very little difference because they're trying to use their positions of power to control and influence other people, and that's what they're doing. And it's a brilliant comparison in my mind. What is your thought, Kevin?
I agree. They can dish it out, but they can't take it.
No, and then it's like the class bully in high school. They're the cool kids. The cool kids are, we're so cool, and then as soon as you pop them in the mouth one time, now you're the big problem. When they've been doing this for years and decades, it's finally coming around to them. But it would be wonderful to have Trump come here. I think we could pack 100,000 people into a place, but unfortunately, we don't have a huge stadium like the Big House back there in Michigan, don't we?
No big house here. But we will continue to highlight that.
There, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Anti-Government. We're going to continue to champion the people's efforts to make that happen, to make America great again, and to have the president here in Idaho. And if we can pull that out, it'll be due to people that are calling in and listening to this program. So we thank you, sir.
But, Kevin, we're with Trump's leadership, we are making America great again. We're making it. The transition is in process. It's well in process.
Duly noted, Anti-Government Ryan. Thank you.
God bless you, Kevin. God bless all your listeners.
God bless you, my friend. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And blessed to be part of your day, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Hank in Boise. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning. Basically, I'll give you an example that parallels the situation with Trump. You go back to Nixon and Spiro Agnew. Nixon used Spiro Agnew to attack the press when they were attacking him. And Spiro Agnew used terms like the nagging nayboobs of negativity, and it used to drive the press wild. Howard K. Smith of ABC News and John Chancellor of NBC News called upon Nixon to restrain Agnew because since he was attacking the press, and it was an deliberate attempt by the administration to destroy the press, and they could not take it back then. But some of your callers made the suggestion about ratings and everything else. The real point of modern journalism, starting with Edward R. Murrow, and also going to the other person, Don Hewitt, who was a longtime editor of 60 Minutes on ABC, is that a journalist is not a mere reporter of news. He's a tribunal of the people, according to that point of view. In other words, they have a duty to advocate a position. And Don Hewitt, of course, reflected that when he did the camera work for the Nixon Kennedy debates, when he put the harsh lights on Nixon to show his 5 o'clock shadow, and if we put the soft lights on Kennedy so that Kennedy would look good, because they felt that the press had more than the duty just to be neutral observers. They had to be advocates because in a sense it was their duty, their civic duty. And this is what basically is the model that's followed, the Edward R. Murrow, Don Hewitt model.
Edwin R. Murrow. Hank, thank you for the call. Traffic and weather together. KIDO Talk. Mr. Pro. Quickly to Terry from State College, Pennsylvania on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Kevin. Words well put this morning with one of your early interviews when she said activist. And I wonder if people are failing to tie it all together. You know, a media activist, which is working against our republic, or the Antifa activists, which are working against the republic. They are one and the same, just at different levels of operation. And when you look over in Portland, O'Keefe caught them on Veritas. Oh, they're teaching each other how to break ribs, do kidney shots, liver shots. They're teaching them how to hurt people. So that's what's coming next. Yeah, they're upping their game plan. And I think, we as the freedom-loving Americans that we are, we need to up our game plan. I don't know exactly what that is. Definitely be, more diligent, more on guard. And there needs to probably be more activism of our own. And I'm open to ideas. I'm open to thoughts. I know myself and some old school patriots of my age, those that are heading to the geriatric wards, we're going to get a little bit more involved down in Twin Falls, see if we can, at the very least, do moral support for those down there that are on the, right on the beachhead, so to speak, keeping a close eye on refugees coming into Idaho. So I encourage everyone out there, Kevin. I'm open to ideas that, get people more involved, because there's more to life, and I say this with all due respect, but there's more to life, people, than calling in and talking to Kevin on the show. Kevin's on the forefront. We all need to climb right up there on the forefront with him, and just not for 3 minutes every morning. Again, I don't know what that is, but we need to up the game plan, because it's going to get worse before it gets better, and I think anyone that's watching it real close and real hard can see it, does understand it, and they're equally as concerned. But we just can't assume, because our president that's in now is making great changes for us, that these changes are all going to be good. No, he's also making changes just by the fact that he's a truthful man. He's making changes that are bad, or I would say he's provoking changes. And they're going to get real bad. I remember the riots of the 60s back east, houses burning, cars burning, a few people killed. I remember that. And this is not good. So the division in the country is coming. It's getting bigger. Don't think that it's getting it's better. It's not getting better at all. So, Kevin, I'm all open to ideas. We're going to get down to a meeting here in a week or so. Tom Munz is going to be there. It's just going to be a luncheon. But, just a handful of us are going to get down. We're going to tell the people down there, hey, what can we do to help? How can we be involved? What information do you have that we don't know that would educate the people up way even more? So there just needs to be a little more activism on our part.
All right, Terry, thank you. Good morning.